Sarah thought the worst part about her grandmother's death would be the funeral. She was wrong. The worst part came 3 weeks later. When she walked into the house she just inherited and heard someone walking upstairs. Someone who shouldn't have been there. What you're about to hear happened in the fall of 1987. Every word is documented in police files. Every detail recorded in Sarah's own voice. The question isn't whether you believe it. The question is, what would you do if it happened to you? Sarah Mitchell was 28 when her grandmother died. She lived in Chicago, worked at a bank, had a cat named Charlie, paid her bills on time, normal life, normal problems. Then came the will. Her grandmother left her everything. The house, the land, all of it way up in northern Wisconsin. A place called Millfield. Population 312. Sarah had visited maybe 5 times as a kid. She remembered it being cold and quiet, too quiet. The house sat on 40 acres of nothing but trees. Built in 1923, Victorian style, 3 stories, no neighbors for miles. The closest house was old Mrs. Henderson's place, and that was still a 20-minute walk through the woods. Sarah figured she'd spend a week up there, clean it out, sell it, move on with her life, maybe use the money for a down payment on something nice back in Chicago. She took 2 weeks off work, drove up alone on a Thursday morning in October. The leaves were turning. Beautiful, really. The kind of place people pay money to visit. The plan was simple. Pack up what mattered, donate the rest, get back to her real life. The first day went fine. She found her grandmother's jewelry, some old photo albums, a few pieces of furniture worth keeping. Nothing unusual, nothing that would make you think twice. But on her second day there, while she was going through the upstairs bedrooms, Sarah found something that changed everything. A room that wasn't supposed to exist. See, Sarah had the original house blueprints. Her grandmother had given them to her years ago, along with some family photos. Just in case, she'd said. Sarah never knew what she meant by that. According to those blueprints, the second floor had 4 bedrooms, a bathroom at the end of the hall. That was it. But when Sarah walked down that hallway, counting doors, she found 5 bedrooms. The 5th room was at the very end of the hall, behind what looked like a closet door. No nameplate, no obvious handle, just a door that blended into the wall so well you'd miss it if you weren't looking. Sarah almost did miss it, but something made her stop. Call it curiosity, call it intuition, call it whatever you want. She pushed on the door, and it opened. Inside was a small bedroom. No windows, just 4 walls painted white, a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling, and furniture, real furniture, not stored away or covered in dust sheets like everything else in the house. Personal belongings, clothes hanging in the closet, a bed that looked like someone had just gotten out of it. The sheets were pulled back. The pillow still had an indent where a head had been. And on the nightstand right next to the bed sat a glass of water. Clear, fresh, no dust on it, no ring marks on the table underneath. Sarah had been in that house for 2 days. She'd walked past that door dozens of times. She was alone, completely alone. So who was living in that room? That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about that glass of water, about the indent in the pillow, about how the room smelled like someone had been there recently, not dusty or old like the rest of the house. Fresh, lived in. She got up around midnight and went back to check. The door was closed. She was sure she'd left it open, but there it was, closed tight like it had never been opened at all. This time, when she pushed on it, it wouldn't budge. The next morning, Sarah decided to search the house. Really search it. If there was one room she didn't know about, maybe there were others. She started in the basement. Dark, musty, the kind of place where you expect to find spiders and old paint cans. Her grandmother had used it for storage. Boxes stacked everywhere. Christmas decorations, old clothes, the usual stuff you keep but never use. Sarah was moving a stack of boxes when she noticed something odd. The basement was smaller than it should be. She'd seen the outside of the house. She knew how big it was. But down here, standing against the far wall, something didn't add up. The wall was newer than the others. Different kind of wood, different stain, like someone had built it later after the house was finished. She knocked on it. Hollow. There was space behind it. Sarah found a crowbar in her grandmother's toolbox. It took her 20 minutes to pry off enough boards to see what was back there. Another room, bigger than the one upstairs, and this one had been used recently too. Furniture, a table, chairs, and covering every inch of the walls, photographs. Hundreds of them, black and white, some color, most of them old, really old. People Sarah didn't recognize. Men in suits, women in dresses from the 40s and 50s. Groups of people standing in front of this very house. All of them smiling. All of them looking like they belonged there. But here's what made Sarah's skin crawl. At the bottom of each photo, someone had written names and dates. John Miller, 1943. Betty Morrison, 1944. Frank and Helen Kowalski, 1945. All of them from the 1940s. All of them posed like family photos, like they lived there. Sarah had never heard these names before. Not from her grandmother. Not from anyone. She picked up a photo of a young man in a Navy uniform. Harold Stevens, 1943. Someone had written. Handsome guy. Couldn't have been more than 20. Big smile. The kind of guy who looked like he had his whole life ahead of him. That's when Sarah heard it. Footsteps. Upstairs. Slow and deliberate. Like someone was walking from room to room, checking things out. Sarah froze. She listened. The footsteps stopped right above her head. In the kitchen, if she had her bearings right. She waited. Maybe it was the house settling. Old houses do that. Make noise for no reason. Then she heard a chair scrape across the floor. Someone was upstairs. In her kitchen. Moving furniture around. Sarah grabbed her phone and did something she'd never done before. She started recording. Not video, just audio. She wanted proof of what she was hearing. Evidence that she wasn't losing her mind. The footsteps started again. Heavier this time. Moving toward the front of the house. Then down the hall. Then up the stairs to the second floor. Sarah followed the sound with her eyes, tracking it across the ceiling. The footsteps went right to the end of the hall, right to where that fifth bedroom was. Then they stopped. Sarah waited in that basement for 2 hours. She didn't hear anything else. No footsteps, no chairs moving, nothing. When she finally got the courage to go upstairs, the kitchen chair was pulled out from the table, like someone had been sitting there, waiting for her. But the house was empty. Every room, every closet, every possible hiding place, empty. That night, Sarah didn't sleep at all. She sat in the living room with all the lights on, listening to the recording she'd made on her phone. For the first 10 minutes, you could hear her breathing, the sound of her moving around in the basement, normal sounds. Then, at the 11-minute mark, you could hear footsteps, clear as day, not house settling, not pipes creaking, footsteps. And at the 15-minute mark, you could hear something else. Something that made Sarah play the recording back 5 times to make sure she wasn't imagining it. A voice, quiet, barely audible, but definitely there. It was saying her name. Sarah didn't leave the house that day, or the next day, or the day after that. She told herself she was just being thorough, taking her time to go through everything properly. But the truth was, she was afraid to leave. Afraid that if she went into town, came back, she'd find evidence that someone had been there while she was gone. And she was starting to notice a pattern. Every night at exactly 2:47 a.m., something would happen. A door would creak open. Footsteps would move across the floor above her. The temperature in the house would drop 10 degrees in the space of a minute. Sarah started setting her alarm for 2:45. She'd sit in the living room with her phone ready to record. And every night, like clockwork, it would start. The footsteps always followed the same path. Kitchen to hallway, hallway to stairs, stairs to the second floor, down the hall to that fifth bedroom. Then silence until morning. But it wasn't just footsteps anymore. Doors that Sarah was sure she'd closed would be standing wide open. The kitchen chair would be pulled out again. The glass of water in that hidden bedroom would be empty, then full again the next day. One morning, Sarah found muddy footprints leading from the front door to the kitchen. Small prints, like a woman's shoes, but Sarah hadn't been outside, and it hadn't rained. That's when she decided to really dig into her grandmother's things. Not just the valuable stuff, everything, every box, every drawer, every scrap of paper. In her grandmother's bedroom, in the bottom drawer of an old dresser, Sarah found something that changed everything she thought she knew about the house. Journals, 5 of them, leather-bound, filled with her grandmother's handwriting. The first entry was dated 1967, the year her grandmother moved into the house. "Moved in today," it said. "The house is beautiful, large, plenty of room for a family. Though I suspect I won't be living here alone." Sarah flipped ahead. Page after page of entries about the previous tenants. That's what her grandmother called them. The previous tenants. "They're very quiet during the day," one entry read, "but at night they move around. I think they're looking for something, or someone." Another entry, dated 6 months later, "I've started leaving food out for them. They seem to appreciate it. Sometimes I'll wake up and find the plate empty. Other times, I'll find small gifts on my nightstand. Flowers from the garden. Smooth stones from the woods. I think they're trying to say thank you." Sarah kept reading. Years and years of entries. Her grandmother writing about conversations she'd had with people Sarah had never heard of. People who, according to these journals, had been living in the house the entire time. "Harold is upset again," one entry said. "He keeps asking about his letters. I told him I don't know where they are, but he doesn't believe me. He's been walking the halls all night for 3 days now." Harold, the young man in the navy uniform from the photograph downstairs. The entries got stranger as Sarah read on. Her grandmother writing about helping these previous tenants with various tasks. Finding lost belongings, delivering messages, even cooking meals that would disappear overnight. But the entry that made Sarah's blood run cold was dated just 2 months before her grandmother's death. "Sarah will be here soon," it said. "They're excited to meet her. Harold especially. He says she looks like someone he used to know. I've told them to be patient, to be gentle. She's not ready to see them yet, but she will be." Sarah closed the journal and sat there in the growing darkness. Her grandmother had known about the footsteps, about the hidden rooms, about whatever was living in this house, and somehow she'd been preparing Sarah for it. That's when Sarah remembered something. Her grandmother's last words to her, right there in the hospital room. "Take care of the house, Sarah, and let the house take care of you." At the time, Sarah thought she was just being sentimental. Now she wondered if her grandmother was trying to tell her something else entirely. A car door slammed outside. Sarah looked out the window and saw Mrs. Henderson from down the road walking up to the front porch. She was carrying a casserole dish and looked nervous. Sarah opened the door before Mrs. Henderson could knock. "Figured you might be hungry," Mrs. Henderson said, holding out the casserole. But she wouldn't come inside, wouldn't even step foot on the porch. "Mrs. Henderson," Sarah said, "can I ask you something about this house?" The old woman's face went pale. "What kind of something? Did you know the people who lived here before my grandmother?" Mrs. Henderson looked around like someone might be listening. Then she leaned in close and whispered, "Your grandmother never told you about the fire?" "What fire?" 1943. This place used to be a boarding house. Had 7 guests staying here. Good people. Quiet. Kept to themselves. One night in November, something went wrong with the furnace. Fire started in the basement. Spread fast. By the time the fire department got here, the whole place was gone. Sarah felt her heart start to race. "What happened to the guests?" Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "That's just it. They never found them. 7 people. Just gone. No bodies. No trace of them anywhere. But the house was rebuilt the next year. Exact same layout. exact same design. Like whoever built it wanted to put everything back exactly the way it was. Mrs. Henderson handed Sarah the casserole and started backing away. Your grandmother was a good woman. She understood things the rest of us didn't. But Sarah, maybe you should think about going back to Chicago. Some houses aren't meant for the living. That night, Sarah didn't wait for 2:47 a.m. She didn't set her alarm. She didn't sit in the living room with her phone ready. Instead, she went to bed early, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she slept through the night. But when she woke up the next morning, there was something on her nightstand that hadn't been there before. A smooth stone from the woods, and a flower from the garden, just like her grandmother had written about in her journal. Sarah made a decision that morning. She was done being afraid, done hiding in the living room at night, done pretending this wasn't real. If there were 7 people living in her house, people who'd been there for 80 years, then maybe it was time to meet them properly. She spent the day preparing. She moved a chair into that 5th bedroom upstairs, the one with no windows, set up her phone to record everything, made sure the battery was fully charged. Then she waited. At exactly 2:47 a.m., it started. The footsteps. But this time Sarah was ready. She was sitting in that hidden bedroom, in the dark, waiting. The footsteps came down the hall, just like always. But when they reached the door, they stopped. Sarah could hear breathing on the other side. Slow, steady, like someone was listening just like she was. Then, very quietly, someone knocked. 3 soft taps on the door. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure whoever was out there could hear it. She took a deep breath and did something that, looking back, was either the bravest or stupidest thing she'd ever done. She knocked back. 3 soft taps just like she'd heard. The door opened. Not fast, not dramatic, just slowly, like someone was being careful not to startle her. And there, standing in the doorway, was a young man in a Navy uniform. Harold Stevens. Just like in the photograph. He looked exactly the same. 20 years old. Big smile. Except now, up close, Sarah could see something else in his eyes. Relief. "Sarah," he said. And his voice was exactly what she'd heard on the recording. Quiet. Gentle. "We've been waiting for you." Behind him, Sarah could see others. A woman in a dress from the 40s. An older man in a suit. All of them looking at her with the same expression. Not threatening, not angry, just grateful. Like they'd been waiting a very long time for someone to finally see them. "We're not here to hurt you," Harold said. We've been stuck here since the fire. We can't leave. We've tried. But something keeps us here. Your grandmother, she helped us. She understood. She said you would too." Sarah found her voice. "What do you need?" Harold smiled, and for the first time since she'd arrived at the house, Sarah felt safe. "We need you to help us remember," he said. "Help us remember who we were, what we lost in the fire, our families, our lives, everything we left behind." And that's what Sarah did. For the next 3 weeks, she worked with them, all 7 of them. She researched their lives, found their families, learned their stories. Harold had been engaged to a girl named Mary. He'd been coming home from the war when he'd stopped at the boarding house for the night. Betty Morrison had been a teacher. She'd been traveling to a new job in Minnesota. Frank and Helen Kowalski had been newlyweds, starting their life together. Each of them had a story. Each of them had people who'd loved them, people who'd never known what happened to them. Sarah found their families, their descendants. She told them what she'd learned. She gave them closure they'd been waiting 80 years for. And one by one, as their stories were told, as their memories were honored, they began to fade. Not disappearing, just moving on, finding peace. Harold was the last to go. He stood in that hidden bedroom one final time, looking around at the place that had been his prison for so long. "Thank you," he said to Sarah, "for seeing us, for remembering us, for helping us go home." And then he was gone. The house was quiet, really quiet. For the first time in 80 years, Sarah was truly alone there. She stayed for one more week, finishing up the work she'd originally come to do, packing up her grandmother's things, preparing the house for sale. But on her last night there, she found one more entry in her grandmother's journal, one she'd missed before. It was dated just a week before her grandmother's death. "Sarah will understand," it said. "She has the gift, the ability to see what others can't, to help those who are lost find their way home. The house chose her just like it chose me, and when her time comes, she'll choose someone else, someone who can see, someone who can help. The house will always need a guardian, someone who understands that not all hauntings are about fear. Sometimes they're about love. Sometimes they're about helping people find peace." Sarah closed the journal and looked around the empty house one last time. She understood now. This wasn't just about inheriting property. This was about inheriting a responsibility, a gift, a calling. She never did sell the house. Instead, she moved there permanently, left her job in Chicago, started a new life in Millfield, and over the years, others found their way to her. People who died with unfinished business, people who needed help moving on, people who needed someone to see them, to remember them, to help them find peace. The house on 40 acres became a way station, a place where the lost could find their way home, and Sarah became its guardian, just like her grandmother before her, just like someone else would someday when Sarah's time came. Because some houses aren't just buildings. Some houses are bridges. Bridges between the world of the living and the world of the dead. And sometimes, if you're very lucky or very unlucky, depending on how you look at it, you get chosen to be the bridge keeper. Sarah thought the worst part about her grandmother's death would be the funeral. She was wrong. The worst part was realizing that death isn't always the end. Sometimes, it's just the beginning of a different kind of life. A life spent helping others find their way home. And sometimes that's exactly the life you were meant to live. What would you do if kindness knocked on your door in the middle of a storm? Charlotte thought she was just helping a stranger. But sometimes the universe has plans we never see coming. Tonight, let me share with you a story that will remind you why small acts of love matter more than we ever imagine. Picture this with me. It's a Tuesday evening in November, and you're Charlotte, 65 years old, living alone in a house that once echoed with family laughter. The rain has been falling for hours, that steady, persistent kind that makes you grateful for warm tea and soft blankets. You're settling into your favorite armchair, the one by the window where you can watch the street. When you hear it, 3 soft knocks at your front door. Most people might hesitate. It's late, it's stormy, and you live alone. But Charlotte has always believed that kindness shouldn't wait for convenient moments. When she opens that door, what she sees breaks her heart in the most beautiful way possible. But she has no idea, absolutely no idea, that this moment will change everything she thought she knew about loss and love. Standing on her doorstep is a boy, maybe 13, maybe 14, soaked to the bone, shivering in clothes that have seen too many nights like this. His backpack hangs heavy with water, and his eyes hold stories no child should carry. Now, what goes through Charlotte's mind in this moment? She thinks of her own grandson, the one she lost touch with 11 years ago when her daughter moved away after that terrible argument. She thinks of all the cold nights, all the doors that might have stayed closed to a child in need. As Henry steps into her hallway, something stirs in Charlotte's memory. Something about the way he moves, the way he quietly says, "Thank you," but she brushes it off. After all, when you're lonely, every child reminds you of the one you miss. What Charlotte planned as one night becomes 3. What she intended as temporary shelter becomes something that feels almost natural. On the second day, as they're sharing lunch, Henry mentions he's good at fixing things. Before Charlotte knows it, he's repaired her squeaky kitchen cabinet, the one that's been driving her crazy for months. Something about the way he says, "my mom," past tense, like she's a memory instead of a person. makes Charlotte's heart clench, but there's something else, something in his mannerisms that feels familiar in a way she can't quite place. It's on the third morning that everything changes. Charlotte is making pancakes. Henry mentioned they were his favorite when she hears him humming in the living room. It's a soft, unconscious melody, the kind you hum when you think no one is listening. The spatula slips from her hand. You see, there's a lullaby Charlotte used to sing to her grandson when he was small, a made-up song about brave little bears and cozy forest homes. She sang it to him every night for the first 6 years of his life, until that fight with her daughter, until they moved away, until the silence stretched so long it felt impossible to bridge. And Henry is humming that exact melody. Charlotte's hands are shaking as she walks into the living room. Henry is arranging the couch cushions, still humming, completely unaware that his world is about to shift on its axis. Time stops. The whole world narrows to this moment, this impossible, beautiful moment where loss transforms into found, where kindness reveals itself as destiny. What happens next is what happens when love recognizes itself across years of separation. Henry doesn't run to her. He's learned to move carefully through the world. Instead, he takes one step, then another, and Charlotte meets him halfway. Through tears and laughter, the story comes out. How Henry's mother, Charlotte's daughter Sarah, had struggled after they moved. How she'd gotten sick. How she'd died 2 years ago. How Henry had been bouncing between foster homes and the streets ever since. How the storm that brought him to Charlotte's door wasn't random at all, but had driven him to wander through his mother's old neighborhood. The same neighborhood where Charlotte still lived, still waited, still hoped. Now Charlotte faces a beautiful problem. How do you rebuild a family that's been broken for 11 years? How do you help a child who's learned to survive on his own remember what it feels like to belong somewhere? The first call she makes is to Sarah's number, the one she's kept in her phone all these years, never quite brave enough to dial. When the automated message tells her it's no longer in service, Henry gently explains what Charlotte's heart somehow already knew. But there are other calls to make. To the social worker who's been Henry's case manager, to the foster family who reported him missing, to the school district about enrollment, to the doctor about getting him checked over. For the first time in 11 years, Charlotte has purpose that goes beyond her own quiet days. And Henry moves through her house like he's remembering how to be a child instead of a survivor. He finds his old pictures in Charlotte's photo albums. He discovers that she kept his drawings from kindergarten taped to her refrigerator. He learns that his room, the one that was briefly his when he was 6, has been waiting for him all this time. But the most beautiful moment comes that evening, when Charlotte is tucking him into his old bed, his real bed, and Henry looks up at her with eyes that are finally at peace. "Grandma," he says, "do you think Mom knows that I found you again?" Charlotte smooths his hair, the same gesture she made when he was small, and smiles through her tears. "I think," she says, "that your mom has been guiding you home all along." So tonight, as you settle into sleep, remember Charlotte and Henry. Remember that sometimes the storms that seem to threaten us are actually carrying us exactly where we need to be. Remember that kindness, real, open-hearted kindness, creates space for miracles we never see coming. And maybe, just maybe, remember to answer your door when kindness knocks. You never know what beautiful story might be waiting on the other side. Sweet dreams. Room 237 was supposed to be empty, had been empty for 3 months. No patients, no visitors, just darkness and silence. But at 2:47 a.m., every single night, someone was calling for help. The call button would light up red, blinking in the darkness like a heartbeat. And if you listened closely, if you really listened, you could hear a voice, weak, desperate, begging for someone to come. Sarah Chen knew hospitals. 15 years on the night shift at Mercy General. She'd seen people die. She'd seen people fight death and win. She'd held hands with strangers as they took their last breath. She'd seen things that would make most people quit and never look back. But she'd never seen this. Never seen anything like this. What you're about to hear happened at Mercy General Hospital between October 12th and October 20th of last year. 8 days that changed everything. The hospital won't talk about it. The administration denies it ever happened. Most of the staff who were there, they don't work there anymore. They moved to other hospitals, other cities. Some of them left nursing entirely. Sarah Chen still works there, still takes the night shift, still walks those same dark hallways. And 3 weeks ago, she finally agreed to sit down with me and tell her story. This is what she told me. Mercy General Hospital sits on the corner of 5th and Madison, right on the edge of downtown. 12 floors of concrete and glass. Built in 1987 when the city was growing and people thought they needed more of everything. More offices, more apartments, more hospitals. It's not the biggest hospital in the city, not the newest, not the best. Just another place where people come when they're broken and hope someone can fix them. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The building looks normal during the day, busy, full of life, doctors and nurses rushing around, families in the waiting rooms, the cafeteria serving coffee that tastes like water and sandwiches wrapped in plastic. But at night, Mercy General becomes something else, something quieter, darker. The hallways stretch longer, the shadows seem deeper, the sounds carry further than they should. Sarah Chun had been working the night shift on the 7th floor for 15 years. Medical wing, internal medicine, not the place where dramatic things happen. No emergency surgeries, no code blues in the middle of the night, just sick people trying to get better or trying to find peace before they can't anymore. The 7th floor had 42 rooms. Most nights, about half were occupied. The other half stayed empty, waiting for the next patient who needed help. Room 237 was one of those empty rooms. Had been for 3 months. It was a corner room at the end of the hall. 2 windows that looked out over the employee parking lot. Nothing special about it. Standard hospital room. 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 small bathroom, 1 TV mounted on the wall that only got basic channels. For most of its history, room 237 was just like every other room in the hospital. Patients came, patients left. Some got better, some didn't. The room didn't care. Rooms don't have feelings. They don't have memories. They're just spaces between walls. At least that's what everyone thought. Until Margaret Williams died there. Margaret Williams was 73 years old when the paramedics brought her to Mercy General on July 10th. She'd fallen in her apartment, broken her hip, but that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was her heart. Margaret had lived alone for 30 years, ever since her husband died in 1993. No children, no family nearby, a few neighbors who knew her name but not much else. She worked as a seamstress until arthritis made it too hard to hold the needle steady. After that, she mostly stayed inside. The apartment where she lived was small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 1 person. But it was hers. She'd lived there since 1985. Knew every crack in the ceiling, every squeak in the floorboards, every sound the building made when the wind blew hard. It was the only home she had. The only place in the world where she belonged. But 6 months before Margaret fell and broke her hip, the city decided her building was too old, too run down. They tore it down, all of it, turned it into a parking lot for the new shopping center across the street. Margaret had to move. The city helped her find a new place, smaller, cheaper, in a part of town she didn't know, with neighbors she'd never met and sounds she didn't recognize. She hated it. Every day she hated it a little more, but she was 73 and alone and didn't have anywhere else to go. That's where she was living when she fell, in a place that never felt like home, in a place where she was just waiting to die. Margaret Williams spent 11 days in room 237, July 10th through July 21st. 11 days that started with hope and ended with something much darker. The first few days were routine, surgery to fix her hip, pain medication, physical therapy, The doctors were optimistic. She was strong for her age, healing well. They talked about discharging her by the end of the week. But Margaret's heart had other plans. It was tired, worn out, ready to quit. The surgery had been hard on her. The anesthesia, the stress. Her body was fighting battles it couldn't win anymore. Sarah Chun was working the night shift during Margaret's stay. She remembers Margaret clearly. A small woman with gray hair and hands that shook when she tried to hold her water cup. Polite, quiet, never complained about the pain or the food or the noise from the hallway. But Margaret had one question she asked every single night. The same question over and over. When can I go home? The first few nights, Sarah gave her the standard answer. When the doctor says you're ready. When you're feeling stronger. Soon. But as the days went on, Margaret's question changed. It became more urgent, more desperate. I need to go home, she would say. I need to go home right now. Sarah would sit with her, try to calm her down, explain that she needed more time to heal, that going home too early could be dangerous. But Margaret wasn't talking about medical danger. She was talking about something else, something deeper. You don't understand, she told Sarah on the night of July 18th. I can't remember where I put things. My photos, my husband's wedding ring, the quilt my mother made. I left them somewhere and I can't remember where. Sarah tried to reassure her, told her that forgetting things was normal after surgery, that her memory would come back, that her belongings were safe. But Margaret just shook her head. It's all mixed up in my mind, she said. The old place and the new place. I keep thinking I'm still in the old apartment, but that's gone now. They tore it down. So where is everything? Where did it all go? That's when Sarah realized what was happening. Margaret wasn't just scared about leaving the hospital. She was scared about where she was going. The new apartment didn't feel like home. The old apartment was gone. She was caught between two places and neither one felt right. I don't know where I belong anymore, Margaret whispered. I don't know where home is. Sarah held her hand, told her it would be okay, that home was wherever she felt safe, that she would figure it out. But deep down, Sarah knew Margaret was right to be scared. Some people spend their whole lives looking for a place where they belong, and some people never find it. July 19th. Margaret's condition got worse. Her heart was struggling. The doctors adjusted her medication, talked about more tests, maybe another surgery. But Margaret had made up her mind about something. She called Sarah over to her bed around midnight. I want to tell you something, she said. About the apartment. The new one. Sarah sat down. Margaret's voice was weak, but her words were clear. I never unpacked, Margaret said. 3 months I lived there and I never unpacked. All my things were still in boxes. I kept thinking it was temporary, that I'd find somewhere better, somewhere that felt right. She paused, took a shaky breath. But I never did. And now all those boxes are sitting in a place that isn't home, with strangers going through my things, deciding what to keep and what to throw away. Sarah squeezed her hand. What would you like me to do? Margaret looked at her with eyes that were already starting to fade. I want you to promise me something. If I don't make it out of here, if something happens to me, I want you to make sure someone goes through those boxes carefully. My husband's things are in there. Pictures of our wedding. Letters he wrote me when he was in the army. You're going to be fine, Sarah said. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Promise me, Margaret said. I promise. Margaret smiled. The first real smile Sarah had seen from her since she arrived. Thank you, she said. Now I can rest. July 20th passed quietly. Margaret slept most of the day. Her breathing was shallow. Her heart rate was irregular. The doctors knew what was coming. So did Sarah. At 2:30 a.m. on July 21st, Margaret woke up. She looked around the room like she was seeing it for the first time. Where am I? She asked. You're in the hospital, Sarah said. You're safe. Margaret nodded. Then she said something that still gives Sarah chills. I can see it now. The old apartment. Still there. Everything's still there. My husband's chair. The kitchen table where we ate breakfast every morning for 25 years. The bedroom where he died. She looked at Sarah with eyes that were suddenly clear and bright. I think I know where home is now. At 2:47 a.m., Margaret Williams closed her eyes and stopped breathing. Heart failure. Peaceful. No pain. She died alone. Sarah was in the room, but Margaret was alone in the way that matters most. No family. No friends. No one who would carry her memory forward. The last thing she said, so quietly Sarah almost missed it, was, "I'm ready to go home now." And then she was gone. After Margaret died, room 237 should have gone back to normal. The body was removed. The room was cleaned. The bed was made with fresh sheets. Everything looked exactly like it had before Margaret arrived. But something was different. The cleaning staff noticed it first. Maria Santos had been cleaning rooms at Mercy General for 12 years. She knew how rooms were supposed to feel after a patient died. Sad maybe, empty, but normal. Just a room waiting for the next person who needed it. Room 237 didn't feel normal. Felt occupied, like someone was still there, watching, waiting. The temperature was wrong. Always 10 degrees colder than the other rooms, even though the thermostat was set the same. The air felt thick, heavy, like breathing through water. Maria tried to clean the room 3 times. Each time she had to leave before she was finished. The feeling of being watched was too strong, too real. "Something's not right in there," she told her supervisor. "Maybe we should leave it empty for a while." The supervisor didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. But he believed in Maria. She was a good worker, reliable, not the type to make up stories or cause problems. So he made a decision. Room 237 would stay empty until further notice. Administrative issues, he called it. Maintenance problems. Something that sounded official and boring and wouldn't make people ask questions. The room stayed locked for 3 months. July through September. No patients. No visitors. No one except the occasional maintenance worker who would go in, look around, and leave as quickly as possible. But empty doesn't mean quiet, and locked doesn't mean safe. Sarah Chun worked the night shift through all of this. She walked past room 237 dozens of times. Sometimes she would stop and look at the door. Remember Margaret. Wonder if she'd kept her promise about the boxes in the apartment. She had. Sarah spent her day off going through Margaret's belongings. Found the wedding photos, the letters from Margaret's husband, the quilt her mother had made. She donated most of the furniture, but kept the personal things. Put them in a storage unit and paid for a year in advance, just in case someone came looking for them someday. No one ever did. Margaret Williams had no family, no friends close enough to care about her things. Her belongings sat in that storage unit like everything else she'd owned. Forgotten, abandoned, lost. But Margaret herself, Margaret wasn't ready to be forgotten. October 12th, 3 months after Margaret died. Sarah was doing her rounds when she heard something that made her stop walking. A soft chime from down the hall. Electronic. Familiar. The sound of a call light turning on. She looked up at the panel above the nurse's station. Room 237. Red light blinking. Sarah stared at the panel for a long moment. The room was supposed to be empty. Had been empty for months. Call lights don't turn themselves on. Someone has to press the button. Someone has to need help. She walked down the hall slowly. Her footsteps echoed off the walls. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like insects. Everything else was dead silent. The closer she got to room 237, the colder the air became. By the time she reached the door, she could see her breath. Sarah pulled out her keycard, swiped it. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet hallway. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was exactly as it should be. Empty bed with fresh sheets. Chair pushed against the wall. Bathroom door closed. Nothing out of place. But the call button was lying on the floor next to the bed. Like someone had been holding it and just dropped it. Like someone had pressed it and then let go. Sarah picked up the call button. It was warm. Body temperature warm. Like someone had been holding it for a long time. She put it back on the bedside table, turned off the call light, checked the room one more time. Nothing, just empty space and cold air. She left the room, locked the door, walked back to the nurse's station. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching her. Someone who needed help but couldn't ask for it properly. Someone who was trying to communicate the only way they knew how. Sarah wrote a note in the log. Room 237 call light malfunction. Maintenance notified. But she knew it wasn't a malfunction. She knew it was something else. Something that didn't belong in the daylight world of medical charts and shift reports and rational explanations. The next night it happened again. Same time, 2:47 a.m. Same room, same warm call button on the floor. And the night after that, and the night after that. Sarah stopped writing reports, stopped calling maintenance, started walking past room 237 without looking at the call light panel. But she couldn't ignore what was happening, and neither could the other nurses on the night shift. Jennifer Walsh had been working nights at Mercy General for 8 years. She was practical, no nonsense, the kind of nurse who dealt with problems instead of complaining about them. But on October 15th, Jennifer had a problem she didn't know how to deal with. She was walking past room 237 around 3 a.m. when she heard something that made her blood run cold. A voice, weak, barely a whisper. "Nurse? Please." Jennifer stopped walking, looked around the hallway. She was alone. The voice had come from inside room 237. She tried to convince herself she'd imagined it. Night shifts do things to your mind, make you hear things that aren't there, see things that can't be real. But then she heard it again, clearer this time. "Help me. I can't find my way." Jennifer stood outside the door for 5 minutes, heart pounding, hands shaking, every instinct telling her to walk away, to pretend she hadn't heard anything. But she was a nurse, and someone was asking for help. She used her keycard, opened the door, stepped inside. The room was empty, but it was freezing cold. So cold she could see her breath like fog. "Hello?" she called out. "Is someone here?" Silence. Then so quiet she almost missed it. "I've been waiting for so long." The voice was coming from the bed, but there was no one there, just sheets and a pillow and empty space. Jennifer left the room, fast, didn't look back, didn't write a report, didn't tell anyone what happened. But word spreads fast among night shift nurses, especially when it's something that doesn't make sense, something that scares you in ways you can't explain. By October 18th, 3 other nurses had similar experiences. Always room 237, always between 2:30 and 3 a.m., always the same voice asking for help. David Kim, a nurse with 20 years of experience, heard the voice asking about going home. "Where is home?" it said. "I can't remember where home is." Lisa Rodriguez heard crying, soft, heartbroken, the sound of someone who'd given up hope. Marcus Thompson heard footsteps, someone walking around the room, back and forth, like they were looking for something they'd lost. But every time someone opened the door, the room was empty, cold, waiting. The nurses started avoiding room 237. They would take longer routes to avoid walking past it. They would ask other staff to check that part of the hallway. They found excuses to be somewhere else when 2:47 a.m. rolled around. But Sarah Chen couldn't avoid it. Room 237 was part of her section, her responsibility, and something about the voice, something about the desperation in it, reminded her of Margaret Williams. Margaret who died alone and scared. Margaret who never found her way home. Margaret who asked the same question every night. "When can I go home?" Sarah started to wonder if Margaret was still asking that question, still waiting for an answer, still hoping someone would help her find her way. Sarah couldn't sleep during her days off. She kept thinking about Margaret, about the voice in room 237, about the promise she'd made to a dying woman. She went back to the storage unit where she'd put Margaret's belongings, spent hours going through the boxes, looking for something, anything that might explain what was happening. In the bottom of the last box, she found Margaret's diary. small notebook with a faded blue cover. Margaret had written in it every day for the last 5 years of her life. Sarah read the entries from Margaret's final months. The fear, the confusion, the desperate longing for something she couldn't name. June 15th. Tried to make the new apartment feel like home today. Hung up some pictures. Put out the quilt Mom made. But it still feels wrong. Like I'm a guest in someone else's house. July 2nd. Had a dream about the old apartment last night. Everything was still there. Tom's chair. The kitchen table. The bedroom where we ate breakfast every morning for 25 years. The bedroom where he died. July 8th. Fell today. Hip hurts bad. But I'm more scared of going to the hospital than I am of the pain. What if I die there? What if I never see home again? The last entry was dated July 9th. The day before Margaret was admitted to the hospital. I don't know where I belong anymore. The old home is gone. The new place doesn't want me. I feel like I'm floating between worlds. Like I'm already dead but don't know it yet. If something happens to me, I hope someone remembers that I was here, that I mattered, that I had a place in the world, even if it's gone now. Sarah closed the diary and sat in her car in the storage unit parking lot. She understood now. Margaret wasn't haunting room 237 because she was angry or vengeful. She was there because she was lost, confused, still looking for the home that had been taken away from her. Still asking the same question she'd asked every night in the hospital. When can I go home? And Sarah was the only person who knew the answer. The only person who could help Margaret find peace. But helping meant going back to room 237. It meant facing whatever was in that cold, empty space. It meant risking her own sanity to help a dead woman find her way home. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was going to spend the night in room 237. She was going to talk to Margaret Williams. And she was going to find a way to help her go home. October 20th was Sarah's night off. She should have been at home, sleeping, resting, doing normal things that normal people do when they're not working. Instead, she was sitting in the parking lot of Mercy General at 11 p.m., staring up at the 7th floor, at the windows of room 237. She'd brought supplies, a thermos of coffee, a blanket, a small flashlight, Margaret's diary, and something else. Something she'd found in Margaret's belongings that she thought might be important. A photograph. Margaret and her husband on their wedding day, 1970. Both of them young and happy and full of hope for the future they were going to build together. Sarah used her employee keycard to get into the hospital through the staff entrance. The night security guard waved at her. Nothing unusual about nurses coming in on their days off. People forgot things, had to check on patients, caught up on paperwork. She took the elevator to the 7th floor. The hallways were dimly lit, quiet. Most of the patients were sleeping. The night shift nurses were at their stations, reading charts or catching up on documentation. Sarah walked to room 237, used her keycard. The door opened with a soft click. The room was freezing, colder than it had ever been. So cold that ice was forming on the windows. Sarah's breath came out in thick clouds. She set up a chair next to the bed, put her supplies on the bedside table, turned on the small flashlight and pointed it at the floor so it wouldn't be too bright. Then she sat down and waited. 11:30 p.m. Nothing. Midnight. Nothing. 12:30 a.m. Nothing. 1 a.m. Nothing. The cold was getting worse. Sarah pulled the blanket around her shoulders, but it didn't help. The cold was coming from inside the room, from something that didn't belong in the world of living people. 1:30 a.m. Sarah heard footsteps, soft, hesitant, someone walking around the room, but she couldn't see anyone. 2 a.m. The footsteps stopped. The room got even colder. Sarah could feel something watching her, something that had been waiting for a long time. 2:30 a.m. A voice, so quiet Sarah had to strain to hear it. Nurse. Sarah's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. I'm here. I've been waiting for someone to help me. I know. I want to help you. Silence. Then, I can't find my way home. I've been looking and looking, But everything's different now. Nothing's where it's supposed to be. Sarah looked at the bed. The sheets were moving slightly, like someone was lying under them. The pillow had an indentation, like a head was resting on it. "Margaret," she said. The movement stopped. The room got so quiet Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. "How do you know my name? I was your nurse. I took care of you when you were here before. In July." "July?" The voice was confused. "Lost. That was a long time ago. Or was it yesterday? I can't remember. Time feels different now." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out the wedding photograph. She held it up so the light from her flashlight illuminated it. "Is this you? You and your husband?" A sharp intake of breath. Then, "Where did you find that? I've been looking everywhere for that picture. I thought it was lost. It was in your apartment, with your other things. I saved them for you." "My apartment?" The voice was getting stronger, more present. "Which apartment? The old one or the new one? I get confused. They tore down the old one, but I keep thinking I can go back there. I keep forgetting it's gone." Sarah felt tears running down her face. "The old apartment is gone, Margaret. But that doesn't mean home is gone. Home isn't just a place. It's wherever you felt loved, wherever you belonged. But Tom is gone too, and the apartment is gone. And I never felt like I belonged in the new place. So where is home now?" Sarah looked at the photograph, at the young couple full of hope and love, at Margaret's face, bright with joy and anticipation. "Home is wherever Tom is," she said. "He's been waiting for you. He's been waiting for you to stop looking for a place and start looking for him." The room got warmer, just a little, like someone had turned up the heat. "Tom." Margaret's voice was different now, hopeful. "Is Tom really waiting for me?" "Yes," Sarah said. "He's been waiting for you to let go of this place, to stop trying to find your way back to something that's gone, to move forward instead of backward. But I don't know how. I've been here so long, in this room, in this cold, empty space. I don't remember how to leave." Sarah stood up, walked to the bed. She couldn't see Margaret, but she could feel her presence. Small, fragile, scared. "Do you remember what you told me the night before you died? You said you could see the old apartment, that everything was still there. Your husband's chair, the kitchen table, the bedroom where he died." "Yes, I remember. That wasn't the past, Margaret. That was where Tom is now. That was him showing you the way home." The indentation in the pillow moved slightly, like someone was nodding. "Close your eyes," Sarah said. "Picture that apartment. Picture Tom sitting in his chair, waiting for you. Picture him getting up when he sees you. Picture him taking your hand and telling you he's missed you." "I can see it," Margaret whispered. "I can see him. Then go to him. Let this place go. Let the fear go. Go home, Margaret." The room got warmer. The ice on the windows started to melt. The oppressive feeling of sadness and confusion began to lift. "Thank you," Margaret said. Her voice was fading, but it was peaceful now. Content. "Thank you for helping me remember." "You're welcome. Will you do something for me? Will you make sure other people know that sometimes when people die alone and scared, they get lost? They need someone to help them find their way home." "I'll remember," Sarah said. "Good. That's good." The room was almost warm now, normal temperature. The feeling of presence was fading. "Margaret," Sarah called out. No answer, just silence, peaceful silence. Sarah sat in the chair until sunrise. The room stayed warm. The oppressive feeling never came back. Whatever had been trapped in room 237 was gone now. Free. At 6 a.m., Sarah packed up her things and left. She walked past the nurse's station, where the day shift was arriving. No one asked her what she'd been doing there. No one seemed to notice anything unusual. The call light for room 237 never turned on again. Sarah thought that was the end of the story. Margaret was at peace. Room 237 was back to normal. The other nurses stopped avoiding that part of the hallway. Patients were assigned to the room again. Life went on. But 3 days later, Sarah discovered something that changed everything she thought she knew about what had happened. She was helping the day shift supervisor clean out old files from the storage room, personnel records that were supposed to be digitized and archived, boxes and boxes of employee information going back decades. Sarah was flipping through files from the 1980s when she saw a name that made her stop breathing. Margaret Williams. Employee ID 4471. Position: registered nurse. Department: internal medicine, floor 7. Hired: March 15th, 1982. Terminated: June 30th, 1990. Sarah pulled out the file with shaking hands. Inside was a black and white photograph. An ID badge photo from 1985. It was Margaret, but not the old, frail Margaret who had died in room 237. This was a younger Margaret, maybe 45 years old, hair still dark, eyes bright and confident, wearing the same style of nurse uniform Sarah wore now. Margaret Williams had worked at Mercy General, on the 7th floor, the same floor where Sarah worked. For 8 years, Sarah kept reading. Margaret's performance reviews were excellent. Patients loved her. She was particularly good with elderly patients and people who were dying alone. She had a gift for making people feel less scared, less lonely. But in 1990, Margaret's husband got sick, cancer. She took a leave of absence to take care of him. The leave was supposed to be temporary, but Tom Williams died 6 months later. Margaret never came back to work. The file contained a letter Margaret had written to the hospital administration. "I want to thank everyone at Mercy General for the 8 wonderful years I spent as part of your team. Working on the 7th floor taught me so much about caring for people in their most vulnerable moments. I hope I made a difference in some small way. I won't be returning to work. Taking care of Tom during his final months showed me that there are different kinds of nursing. And right now I need to focus on taking care of myself. But I will always remember the patients I cared for, especially the ones who died alone. I hope someone was there to help them feel less afraid. Thank you for everything." Sarah sat in the storage room, holding Margaret's personnel file, and understood what had really happened. Margaret knew the hospital. She knew the routines. She knew the sounds and the smells and the feeling of walking those hallways in the middle of the night. She knew that night shift nurses answer when patients call for help. But more than that, Margaret knew what it felt like to be scared and alone. She knew what it felt like to lose the person you love most in the world. She knew what it felt like to be lost between the life you had and the life you're supposed to have now. Margaret had spent 8 years helping people who were dying alone. And when she died alone in room 237, some part of her remembered that job. Remembered that calling for help was what you did when you were scared and didn't know what to do next. She wasn't haunting the hospital out of anger or unfinished business. She was doing what she'd always done. She was asking for help, and she was trusting that someone would come. Someone did come. Sarah came, and Sarah did what Margaret had done for 8 years. She helped someone who was scared and alone find a way to feel less afraid. But there was one more thing Sarah discovered in Margaret's file. Something that made the whole story even more heartbreaking. A commendation letter from 1987. Margaret had stayed late one night to sit with a patient who was dying. An elderly woman with no family. The woman was scared, kept asking when she could go home. Margaret held her hand and talked to her about home until she passed away peacefully. The letter praised Margaret for her compassion and dedication, for understanding that sometimes the most important thing a nurse can do is simply be present. Be there when someone is afraid. Be there when someone is lost. The patient's name was Dorothy Chun, Sarah's grandmother. Sarah's grandmother had died at Mercy General when Sarah was 12 years old. Sarah barely remembered the details, just that her grandmother had been in the hospital and then she was gone. Sarah's parents had protected her from the sadness and the fear, told her that her grandmother had passed peacefully. They never told her that her grandmother had died alone, that she'd been scared, that a nurse named Margaret Williams had held her hand and helped her find peace. Sarah had become a nurse because of her grandmother's death, because she wanted to help people the way she wished someone had helped her grandmother. She'd never known that someone had. She'd never known that Margaret had. The realization hit Sarah like a slow, rising tide. Margaret had once comforted her grandmother in her last moments, And now, decades later, Sarah had done the same for Margaret. 2 lives, 2 acts of compassion, bound across time. Neither woman knowing then what it would mean, but both answering the same call, to simply be there when it mattered most. Sarah closed the file slowly, pressing her hand over the old photograph inside. In the stillness of the storage room, she could almost feel her grandmother's presence and Margaret's. Not as ghosts, not as cold shadows, but as a warm memory. That night, Sarah walked past room 237 again. The door stood open now, the light spilling softly across the hallway. Inside, the bed was neatly made, the air warm and calm. Ordinary. But Sarah paused, just for a moment, and whispered. She found her way home, and in the quiet, she thought, or maybe just imagined, that she heard a woman's voice, calm and content, say, "Thank you, Sarah. You did well." Sarah smiled through the sting of tears. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps quiet in the long hallway. Because in the end, the story wasn't about a haunted room at all. It was about what it means to be seen, to be remembered, to be guided home, even when home is no longer a place you can touch. And somewhere, beyond the walls of Mercy General, Margaret Williams was home at last. And so was Sarah.